Hey, Shelley.
Hey, Eric.
Hello. I'm going to change my name on my video here. Hold on a second.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Hey, Cash.
Hey, Cash.
Hey there. Sorry, I apologize. I'm coming to you from my car because I had something that ran long, so I had to jump on from there. I'm not driving though.
Well, I hear that Tesla's introduced a Zoom feature in their cars now. So if
That would actually be kind of brilliant, kind of dangerous potentially, but
a little bit.
I think we have a quorum. I see Ken, Melinda, Matt, and me. Am I right about that, Eric?
Yep, we have a quorum.
Okay, perfect. I'll call the meeting to order then at 6:33 p.m. and I'll look to Eric to take attendance.
Sure. Chair Cash Parker.
Here.
Vice Chair Matt Crabtree.
Here.
CJ Cullinan is currently absent. Melinda Ellswick.
Here.
Lauren Cooper is absent. Hannah Miles absent. And Ken Chu.
Present.
Okay, and then noted for staff, Eric Sampson and Sergio Renteria are present this evening.
Great. Thank you, Eric. That'll move us into approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Is there any Discussion on the minutes? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve those.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of approving the minutes from last meeting, please say aye.
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 That motion carries. Minutes are approved. And that brings us to, oh, sorry, I skipped over public forum. I don't think there's any members of the public, are there, Eric?
Nope.
Okay, sorry about that.
No.
That brings us to new business. And the first item of new business was raised at the last meeting concerning the zoning definitions as part of CodeNext and potential historic preservation impacts. I included, Matt was kind enough to provide me to include the city council study session packet from, I forget exactly the date of the city council study session, but there's some items on page 58 in particular, but I'll turn this over to you, Matt, if you want to open up the discussion since you raised this item at the last meeting.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I sent that information over and it is interesting here. And and actually just as a real quick point of order, Eric, with staff, who else from staff is with us tonight?
Sergio Renteria from the city attorney's office.
Sergio. Okay. Sergio from the city attorney's office. Very cool. Okay. I was just curious if they were from zoning also, or community development. Okay, so yeah, this was way back in January that this particular city council packet was provided to council and discussed. A lot of this discussion, I think, dates back to November approximately. There's been a lot of interest, attention, and energy on this of recent. And quite a bit of changes and changes in discussion. It's important to note that this is not being considered a rezoning. This is and Eric, you can help me out with this because I think Brian corrected me on this. This is not officially a rezoning, but rather a redefinition of zoning in R1 areas, depending upon the type of construction that is built. Is that right?
Yep.
However, it is important to note that this is the first time in nearly 80 years that R1 districts within the city have been opened up for this level of development. Zoning maps dating all the way back to the 1940s appear to be relatively consistent with single family being designated as a specific area and followed. There's obviously exceptions that have been made to that. Now, there's, I want to try to, corral the discussion into the effects of historic preservation in our community as this, areas that were previously off limits to development on large scales, and really arguably, we can say that development can happen in the city anywhere and should. Really, any healthy city should see some level of renewal and housing stock. There's always those situations where that happens. However, Inglewood has encountered a tremendous amount of development that has occurred over the last 10 years. And largely most of that development has been in areas where higher density residential has been allowed. And we've lost a lot of historic properties and historic homes to that level of development. I know specifically in my area, and I think Melinda's area, quite a bit has occurred. So now that they're considering this new redefinition of R1 single family zoning in lower density areas, that's going to potentially interest developers into coming into areas that were previously neighborhoods that were previously off limits to them. And with the evidence that's been shown in the higher density areas, the R2A, R2B areas, I live in R2B, we have seen that when that happens, there's a lot of money to be made on high density residential. And there's more of a motivation to come in and change out the housing stock with the higher density construction. So that's my position. I brought this to the commission because of the historic impact and the impact the neighborhood. I've said this time and time again. Historic preservation is not just preserving the individual structures and buildings that have a sentimental value. There's more to it than that. This is quite literally neighborhood preservation. There's a character associated with the homes that have stood the test of time, and a value that close-knit, tight community that we all know of today in Inglewood, and we cherish. The trees, the kind of overall character the neighborhood contributes to the type of, I guess, the neighborhood perception and neighborhood itself. So anyway, that's my introduction on all this. I'll open the floor right now to get input. Now, Ken, welcome to our commission. I know that this is a big topic to kind of start out as your first full meeting, right? Or second meeting, but really the first full meeting as a member of our commission. And I would hope that you chime in, and I'd love to get your opinion on this also. But it's a lot to take in what's happening right now in Inglewood and the changes. So I'll turn it over to the floor. Anybody that, Cash, if you want to have any comments and mention anything on this and what I said.
Well, yeah, I let me just ask, I guess, a question of you, and maybe Eric knows. I don't know if you went to any of the CodeNext or council study sessions related to this topic. Do you know where council is at on this? Have they reached consensus? Is this going to end up in the code? Is it up in the air? I'm just curious where, if anyone knows, where council is at on these proposed amendments.
I can jump in. I've attended a lot of them. Of course, Eric, obviously this is Eric's big deal. So this is what he has to work on. Whatever council tells community development to do, he has to do. So maybe Eric knows better than me on this one. I'll let you jump in, Eric.
I was just going to say that they had the most recent working session or study session with council this past Monday, and I was going to send out a link if you had not received that. So you were able to check out the video. I was unable to attend that night, so I don't know what had come of it. And then Brian has been out of the office the past couple of days, so I haven't really had a chance to catch up with that. But I was planning on forwarding that link to the HPC so you guys could check it out, and that will probably give you the most recent idea of where council's thinking is currently at the moment.
I was able to make it to most of the meeting. I watched a lot more of it at home once I had to leave. So I can kind of generally summarize. I know that city attorney's office, I'm sorry, Sergio. Is that correct, Sergio? Got your name right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know you were there presiding over the meeting. So you probably have a take on this too, if you'd like. I know you turned your camera on there for a minute. I don't want to put you on the spot because obviously this is less attorney related and more, I guess zoning related. But anyway, my understanding from the meeting is that they are still considering, and there is a consensus that has remained of 4 council members, a majority of council, for increasing density under certain conditions in R1 zoned areas. The discussion originally started out as certain options relating to either corner lots only, or actually within any lot was another discussion, another opportunity there. And it seems to have now gone to corner lots with still some discussion of infill, but limiting the amount of construction. That was what was discussed. The last one was limiting the amount of construction to a certain number of properties on a block per X period of time, be it a year or be it 3 years, limiting that. There doesn't appear to be any official final thought on that, But I mean, regardless of where they're headed with this, with the most recent consensus, it is interesting still to see that they are still proposing to increase density in what was formerly low density areas. Yeah, I mean, I think a quick just cliff notes on it is corner lots allowing this within some conditions, having this mid block come in. Now I can see problems with that, but anyway, go ahead, Cash.
Oh, I was just gonna say, this may be an unanswerable question, but do you know the genesis of where this proposed change came from? Was it someone on council? Was it the consultants who were working on CodeNext? And how did this show up as a proposal? If you or Eric, if you know, I'm just curious about that.
I cannot comment to that exactly. I have heard that this might have come from multiple places, but Eric, there was a study that was done, root something early on. Can you comment to that, Eric, where this originally was proposed?
I think it was the root policy analysis, I believe, partially that, which I can't speak to any more on that. But that, and then possibly best practice research on behalf of the people doing the code rewrite.
Okay, so the consultants. So this came from potentially a market research, or not a market research, but rather a research in Root. I'm sorry, Root. Who was the name of him again?
It was root policy analysis.
Root policy analysis. Okay, and then also from the consultants, and then I believe there was also some motivation that came from a number of council members too on this too, on that also. I'm not sure on the last part there.
Is the idea that by allowing this higher density in R1 zone that promotes affordable housing? Is that the ostensible policy reason for it?
As it was when I first heard about this, the opinion was a meeting the 60 to 80%. In fact, you can see that in the Inglewood periodical that comes out every few months, that the mayor had made mention of 60 to 80% AMI affordability and area median income. The idea, the general idea that was brought forth by a number of council members supporting this mentioned that you have to encourage developers to be able to generate that one affordable unit. So you could have up to 4 units on a lot, and thus 3 of the units being at market rate, 1 of them being affordable. And then, but now as of the last meeting, the last presentation on this made mention that they are now outside of the 60 to 80% AMI. They're now up to 100% AMI for the affordable unit for purchase properties, and 80% AMI for rental properties. I need to further calculate this, but rough back of the napkin, I see nearly a net equal to the house that they tore down at 100% AMI.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, yeah, thank you for answering those questions. Melinda or Ken, do you have any thoughts or questions? Matt, it sounds like, I don't mean to put you or Eric, either one of you on the spot, but both you guys sound like you're pretty knowledgeable about this. So if there's other questions or discussion, I'll open it up.
I think Melinda's got her hand raised, so we'll let her let her
I
jump in.
have an opinion on
Oh yeah,
everything.
sorry, I missed that. Please,
Right.
by all means.
Okay. I noted I attended or watched the entire March 7th council study session, and it was I'd never seen council chambers that full. The citizens were really up in arms about, and most of them about R1. So Excuse me. Nothing like starting to choke while you're talking. But,
Been there.
yeah. But Matt spoke at that. Say it was well, part of it was the developers wanting permission to build on or rezone some industrial areas and build an apartment house for their profit on some poisonous land, but poisonous land subject to flooding. And council seems to be okay with that. So I'm sure council's also okay with, yeah, let's cram as many unaffordable houses into as we possibly can into every district in town. So
And just
that's my opinion.
sure, and Melinda, as a point of order on this, or point of what, not point of order, it would be as a simple point to make. I'll put it that way. I'm outside of Robert's rules. I'm sorry, Kadish. This is a point of
You're
order.
good.
It would be more a point of, yeah, there's 3 points and I can't remember what that is. Forget it. Anyway, both Melinda and I have spent many years volunteering for Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah.
And there's and I'm starting to feel this right now because I have had some comments, about this, where I've talked to council, and I am not against affordable housing by any means. I am very much, this is not an argument of affordable housing or not. This is an argument of what's responsible for our neighborhoods and if we will actually get affordable housing in the end. And that's what greatly bothers me about this.
Well, to pick up on that point, whether this actually results in any affordable housing seems a very open question from your description of everything that's gone on and from looking at the city council study session, because I agree. I mean, that's a laudable, important goal, but this doesn't, it's very much an open question whether this actually does anything to achieve that goal. I agree with that.
Sure. Can we get Ken's opinion on this? I'd like to hear from you because I think you have a background in affordable housing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, it's an interesting thing to kind of contemplate. I'm actually curious. I actually don't know how council works. So, how those study sessions, they weren't public forums, and they weren't designed as public forums, were they?
Well, the study sessions, and others can comment here, the study sessions are open to the public. They're public meetings, but the ability of the public to comment at study sessions, I do think, is limited. I think it has to be essentially invited guests that comment at study sessions. Is that right, Eric or Matt or Melinda or anyone else? Who knows?
Yeah, that's pretty much correct for study sessions.
Yeah. So it has to be an actual council meeting for it to be, I guess, completely open to anyone to show up from the public and comment.
So how does that work in terms of decision making? I mean, is there going to be an opportunity for neighborhood and residents to chime in on what their feedback is on this proposal? I mean, if it gets to that stage.
I can kind of hop in a little bit on this.
Please, please.
I know that there's been a few council members holding open houses on this subject. But for the main kind of community input, there will be a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission once the draft of the CodeNext rewrite is finalized. So there will be a public hearing there, which every member of the public, whoever wants to come and speak, will be able to do so. And then Planning and Zoning Commission will make a recommendation to council regarding the CodeNext rewrite. And then there will be another public hearing when it goes before council. So there will be a couple official opportunities for input.
That's helpful. I mean, you know, I guess I sort of wonder, I mean, just in terms of process, like, you know, Matt, what are you proposing that this commission do, whether we support this initiative or whether we don't support this initiative? Like what, I actually don't know what our where we fit into it. Does that make sense, what my question is?
And that's a valid question, and I'll defer to Cash here on what on maybe direction here is the best thing for us to do. My opinion on this is that this directly affects the historic character of a lot of our community and could thus affect a lot of the properties, you know, the historic homes, the homes that you know make up the fabric of our neighborhood. More of those will be lost to development than if this had not been done. And so from a historic standpoint, from a neighborhood, you know, historic and neighborhood preservation standpoint, this is a pretty drastic change.
I agree with that. And I agree generally, Matt, with all of your points. I do wonder, to Ken's question, because I had that question lingering in my mind as well, Ken. I don't know what we can do legally as a commission, because I'm not sure, and you know, maybe Eric or Sergio can jump in here. I'm not sure we can take a position on a I mean, I know we've taken a position in terms of our preservation ordinance and what should happen with that. I'm not sure what we as a historic preservation commission can do. I mean, perhaps we can take a position in some sort of, I don't know if it would be in the form of a resolution or something like that, saying that, you know, we object on these X, Y, and Z grounds. You know, it would affect historic character of our neighborhoods and so forth. I haven't looked into or done any legal type of research on the mechanics of that, of what we as a commission can do. I don't know, and I'm not Eric or Sergio. I'm not trying to put either of you on the spot. I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that, because I haven't looked into that, of what we as a commission can do when it comes to something like that.
I'll let Sergio hop in if he has anything.
Yeah, Cash, that's a good question. Just broadly speaking, the powers and duties of the commission are more to promote and advise city council on historic preservation. I can look into the research and more to the charter itself to see what, if anything, can be done.
Yeah, that would be appreciated. Just so that we know what we can do. I mean, if it's as simple as expressing, you know, through a resolution, this is the position of this commission. This has a negative effect on historic preservation. You know, if we can do that and express that view to council as a commission, and that, you know, that would seem to be perhaps within our advisory powers on historic preservation, because I think, Matt, to your point, I mean, I do think it has a direct impact on historic preservation. And I think, you know, there's probably a lot of the other folks, you know, individuals and groups that are involved have different concerns about the issues related to that rezoning. But as it relates to this commission, it does seem like it is germane to historic preservation. I think that's a fair point.
I guess some of the other questions that I have too, and you know, I think this is maybe a question for Eric, but you know, have the council looked at other communities who have, well, so for instance, like Wheat Ridge and Sloan's Lake, right? They had massive development in that area over a number of years, and all of a sudden, reverse course on that because of what it was doing to the neighborhood. And I'd just be curious to, I don't know the full story of what happened in Wheat Ridge / Sloan's Lake, but it would be useful, to just see how that all played out, and to see if there were pitfalls that, they that caused them to kind of reverse course. And it was pretty significant, I think, right? It was maybe just a few years ago, I think, that would be kind of informative for this process. I mean, in general, as somebody who works in affordable housing, I actually promote the idea of increasing density in my work. But a lot of times, we talk about it as targeted density increase, right? And in ways that are in alignment with kind of how the community is laid out already, and how to preserve kind of the characteristic of that neighborhood. And so, it does look in the plan, and I could be misreading this, but it does look like there are multiple options of how to target that density increase. And I think one of them looks like it kind of promotes this idea of targeted density closer to kind of commercial industrial areas or parts of Englewood. And so like that may be an approach that may be useful, right? And so there's always a pro and con to all of it, right? But I definitely agree with you. I mean, big concerns are, losing historic properties that really kind of define Englewood as the neighborhood that it is, right? So I don't know if any of that's useful, but my 2 cents.
No, it's very useful.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say that is actually incredibly useful. And to your point, I mean, one of the options that's been floated is potentially to maybe more efficiently use the land, or encourage more efficient use of the land along Broadway. Car dealerships, a lot of parking lots. That's not particularly the most efficient use of land. And you never want to be in a taking situation, but I would imagine with the current car market right now that a lot of the dealers the smaller dealers might actually be excited at the opportunity that the value of their land would be increased through some overlay zoning, some secondary zoning use, and allowing for high density apartments. And maybe even reintroduce, hey, there's the thing I've said quite a few times, where in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was a big urban renewal effort that came through that caused a lot of damage to historic properties and to businesses, small business. And I guess more inappropriately, I've called that urban removal. But anyway, the actually getting some of that back, because you could say to, if you want to exercise this high density residential opportunity along Broadway, by changing from a commercial parking lot or commercial car dealer, you could then say, all right, well then here's the guidelines. First floor retail, second, third, fourth, above that. So a structure that is a total of 4 to 5 stories, and you have to meet a certain percentage of affordable units, and it's more controllable at that point. I know one of the things that they're saying with the R1 changes is that the affordability deed restriction would only exist for a period of a certain number of years, 10, 15 years. And at that point in time, whereas within and I don't know, Ken, if this is more of a normal thing or not, but within maybe an apartment complex, you have more control over affordability, because it simply exists. And for a longer period of time, you have the opportunity to control that affordability, and you can keep units at a lower cost. Is that pretty common? What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it sort of depends on how that development is structured. Multifamily developments, can potentially have longer affordability life cycles to them. but it just sort of depends on how that's structured, right? But I think in alignment with that, I mean, the other question that I have too is I'm not familiar with the height restrictions in Englewood, but I've noticed that a lot of the apartment buildings or the multifamily housing is not very tall, and I didn't know if there was a height restriction in Englewood, and so that's another way of kind of tackling that issue, right? Because multifamily housing developers often want to build taller so that they can get more units out of a square footage of land. And so, but if that's a restriction that we have here in Englewood, then that poses a problem. But often that's one really big incentive for developers to build more units within a smaller lot of land, and it increases density in a smaller footprint. And if you can do that near commercial districts, it helps to kind of preserve some of the residential areas as well.
Yeah.
And there was actually protests on the bulk plane requirements because in a lot of the residential areas that are being damaged right now, they're building 3-story duplexes and so forth that are overshadowing single-story single-family houses all around them. Metz Street is a really good example of that. But I also wanted to point out that Habitat for Humanity used to build single-family houses, and they don't anymore. I don't know how many years it's been since they actually built a single-family house. They're all duplexes or townhomes, and all over the place. And this Sam's Automotive thing, Habitat probably could have made a really nice, affordable community there, but
Yeah.
don't suppose they gave them a chance.
Well, and to your point, Melinda, that the Habitat Homes, it's a private organization that invests into the homes, and the home will always be part of Habitat.
Right.
And
Well, not exactly. I mean, the homeowner will eventually pay it off. It's a 0 interest loan.
right.
That's
But if
it
you
will
sell it-
eventually be their home.
But if you sell it, you do sell it back into Habitat, or at least that's the way that
Yes, yeah,
you sell it back into Habitat. So it goes back into the program, back into the pool. You will own the home. It is your home.
Yeah.
However, there is that there. And actually it's interesting. You mentioned that the first Habitat home that I worked on was way back in, I believe that was back in 2003, and it was at Colfax and Stewart. Way down there, and that was a duplex.
mhm.
So, but anyway, you mentioned the bulk plane stuff. That is on the individual residential properties. The bulk plane was raised, I believe, to a 17-foot bulk plane, which is quite high. Now, when we're talking about potentially large commercial multifamily structures, along Broadway, that might be a new thing. That's almost a blank slate opportunity for the city to consider. What is the massing of this? How big can we make these without, affecting the neighborhoods behind them? But I think the impact would be effectively less if built on, and I think you could probably fit more in. Honestly, I've heard a number that there's only 9,000 lots. I mean, I think with 6.5 square miles with 9,000 lots to, properties to work from. That's not a huge impact to the affordability of, if you were to turn every one of those lots into, fourplexes, that's not a lot of impact on that. Whereas if we do have a lot of frontage along Broadway that could be turned into condominium apartments. Obviously there's the defect law in Colorado, which makes condominiums difficult, but anyway, but at least apartments that could be controlled. So anyway, I don't know. So that's my thing.
Matt or Eric or Melinda or anyone who knows, do you know what the next steps are, the timeline is? I'm thinking we can keep this on the agenda next month and continue our discussion and talk further with Sergio about what we can do as a commission, depending on consensus among the commission. But yeah, what are the next steps or timeline for council on this? It's all part of CodeNext, right? So it's nothing's happening anytime soon.
Yeah, so I don't know how many other study sessions that they have remaining for the CodeNext project. I know the original intent had been to be before council at the end of 2022, and just how things go as they go, and they get delayed. So I don't know when exactly it's scheduled at this point to go before P&Z and council. But we'll probably have a better idea once those study sessions with council wrap.
Sure.
Hey,
Okay.
can I ask another question?
Sure.
I'm sort of curious. Has there ever been any, or as a part of this CodeNext project, has there been a survey done or performed that kind of identify, historic districts across Englewood? And I ask that because, as they consider this change in definition for zoning, is that an avenue to kind of explore for this commission to, identify either protected districts that are either exempt from this new definition or something like that, in order to preserve historic areas in Englewood?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure who else wants to weigh in. I don't think it was specifically tied to CodeNext, but there was a grant to the city, the Pinion survey. There was a survey done by the Pinion consulting firm. I don't know that it looked specifically at districts. It was more focused on individual properties of historic character across Englewood. But Matt or Melinda, what am I missing on that point?
I'd say I was just hunting for the final report from Pinion that we could forward it to Ken and help him catch up on this.
And I can certainly forward that if you can't find it, Melinda.
Okay, yeah.
I'll jump in here real fast, so that's okay, Melinda. So it was basically an inventory of the historic growth, basically the housing cycles that have occurred in Englewood, property cycles that have occurred within Englewood over the years, basically starting right around the turn of the 19th, the 20th century.
Yeah.
19th century. Boy, that's anyway.
1800s to 1900s.
1800s to 1900s. Thank you.
Yeah.
During that time on up to present day, showing the growth cycles of growth and the fill out of it was basically a housing stock inventory that talked about, it identified areas of attention. I think there's still more to be done with that. We want to take the data from that report and actually develop, regions and areas and official recommendations. Excuse me. But there are defined areas within that are very special when you come to a historic standpoint, right? I would classify that as Arapahoe Acres as one of those areas. Is probably has the most attention. That is an entire subdivision that was built in the mid-century modern style and has largely stayed the same. You have the remains of historic downtown, which is kind of the early days of Englewood right there. You have probably over on our side of town, both I say our side of town, Melinda and I live in the same neighborhood over in the north end of the city. You have a lot of homes that date back to 1910, 1920, 1930. They're the arts and crafts style bungalows. Those areas both on the east and west side of Broadway on the north end of Inglewood. I've heard that on the east side, I'm sorry, west side of Broadway, the west side of Broadway largely supported the General Ironworks, manufacturing plant that was there. So you have a very interesting, mix of properties there that are, date to the early 1900s on up to the 1920s, 1930s. And as you get across Broadway, onto the east side of Broadway, you have homes that are all very, a lot of homes that are in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s era. So there's little pockets of kind of developments that occurred over the years. As you get further south in Inglewood, those homes are largely built in the 60s and 70s. Then, so that's basically that. And that report from Pinion told us a lot of this information and then identified the eras of homes that were the most at risk. Not necessarily the areas, but that data is within there. It just needs to be extracted.
Yeah, I think they identified like only 6 still extant houses that were built in the 19th century.
Yeah.
Right.
And they totally missed the Scarrett house.
The final revision, they got it right.
Yeah.
But because the Scarrett house had somehow had been redefined, it was said it was built in 1910. And that's not true. that was county issue.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if that's an option for us to explore. Maybe Eric and Sergio can provide more information. But if one thing that we could do as a commission, and if this is sort of a path that City Council is going to be heading towards, without really, if it's sort of not a done deal, but if it's going to go this way, I guess one of the questions is it within our purview to make a recommendation based on either that report or a survey of some sort to preserve either specific blocks or specific I don't know, areas or whatever you would call that. That's not all of Inglewood, of course, right? But I mean, I just received my beautiful little cloth tote bag with all the little neighborhoods on it. It was so beautiful. I was so happy to get it. And but maybe within each of those neighborhoods or communities, there's a block in every one of those that we identify as some sort of exemption to this change that really kind of preserves that block as a part of kind of the history and memory of Inglewood, right?
Sure. I just want to make mention that the neighborhood map was a project that this commission worked on. So
yes, for quite some time.
Oh my God, years. And I'm I was just at the rec center that day and I look at that and my wife was there. I'm like, hey, I worked on that.
Yeah, I said the same thing to my wife when the bag arrived at our house. Yeah, so it was all worth it because we got the multicolored tote bag. No, it was a lot of labor went into that with this commission, and so yeah, it was a project of this commission. That's true.
So,
yeah. So is there, like I said, I think let's just keep this on the agenda next month. Are there further discussion points or questions before we move on to our additional items? Matt, thank you for and Melinda too, but Matt, thanks for bringing it to our attention and it's sussing out that city council study session packet.
And again, thank you for your input on this too. I just want to
well, I would point out right now, we are still operating under the 2004 version of Historic Preservation Commission. So yeah, we might be able to offer some advice to council, but they haven't been paying attention. So that until the CodeNext thing gives us a few more teeth.
Well, that's, yes, well, that this all sort of foreshadows our old business item. So hopefully
Yes.
soon.
Oh, and
Hopefully
Ken,
soon.
I found the thing and I just emailed you the opinion report. So
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. We'll continue this discussion, probably not just next month, for a while, it sounds like, given the timetable of everything on the CodeNext project. But thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention on the commission. The next item of new business is probably something, because there's only 4 of us here tonight, we might have to table for next month. Just because we have a couple of new commission members, I put the meeting day on the agenda just to discuss that, to make sure it's workable for everyone reasonably. But and I'm happy to hear anybody's thoughts on that. It's perfectly fine for me. The meeting day works well for me, as well as any other would. But maybe we'll just carry that over to next month, because one of our newer members in particular is not here. I just don't think we've talked about this in a year and a half or something like that. So I don't know if there's any comments on the meeting day.
I noticed that Councilmember Russell rather thought that we should all be meeting in person again. She brought that up in that same endless meeting. It wasn't endless, it was like 6.5 hours. But we had actually already, I believe, discussed reasons for us to continue to meet virtually, that we could share files, we could collaborate on things more easily, and those of us who have to travel for work can still attend meetings from some other place.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We did discuss that, and that was, I guess, not exactly my idea behind that item, but I'm glad you brought that up, Melinda. I think it does relate to that. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have in-person meetings, but even if we have in-person meetings, I think they should at least be hybrid, in the sense that there should be an option to be virtual, to do it over Zoom. Like tonight, for instance, hence I'm sitting in my car. I had something that ran long, so I'm it worked out well tonight, or like when I'm out of town. I know Matt's out of town often for work, so at least at minimum a virtual option. But virtual meetings are fine, because generally we get better attendance that way. I mean, this is the first meeting in a while that I can remember that we've only had 4. We've typically had a little more attendance, and we also haven't run into the issue as much of not having a quorum with it being virtual. But I don't. Are there other thoughts on that point about virtual versus in person?
I'll jump in and say that while the world kind of recovers from COVID, it will probably never be the same, because everybody now likes to work from home. But it is still nice to have the occasional in-person kind of opportunity. I think there's a collaboration that can occur in person. It's a little different. I'm not going to say it's any better, but in person, sometimes you get a different, I guess, tone to things. I think, I mean, again, though, tonight it was perfect to be able to just come down in the basement here and hop on a Zoom. That was a lot easier than having to drive all the way to City Center, and I probably would have been late tonight.
I'm
So
curious, when you guys were meeting in person, did you ever have more attendees from the public? I mean, non-commission members.
A couple of
No.
times we had the members of the public, but
No, I would say we've more often, and not that it's often, I would say we've had folks from the public attend more often, being
Virtually?
virtual
Oh,
than we
really?
did when we were in person.
I just asked because there may be members of our community who either don't have internet or who don't have computers for home, and in-person engagement may just be easier for them. So that's just another consideration.
It's a fair point.
That's cool. Yeah. I don't know. I might throw out the idea. I mean, actually, to go back to the original question at hand here, meeting day, Wednesday works great for me. That's Wednesdays are my days for meetings pretty much. So that works out well. But as for in person, I might throw out the idea that, quarterly we have a in-person meeting to kind of keep the, I don't know, just at least I see people once in a while.
I like that idea. Yeah, no, I miss seeing you guys, or meeting you in person. So I think that's a good idea. I like that idea. Right. Well,
we have had, for instance, the gathering in the library to as part of our map project.
yes.
And where we not only met with each other, but a great deal of the community. And that actually informed that map project too. That we would never have named that one neighborhood Forest Hill if it hadn't been all those Forest Hill people who showed up for the meetings.
Yeah, and that was one of those situations where you did not want to you didn't want to go against their wishes. There were a lot of them.
Yeah, I think I talked to half a dozen, 10 of them.
Yeah. Well, and when they started telling me about this, I said, hey, you put your label on there. Why do you think this one is called Strayer's Broadway Heights? It's because Matt and I wanted it that way. So yeah.
That one looked nice on the tote bag, by the way, the Strayer's Broadway Heights.
Yeah.
Well, good. Yeah, Matt, I like that idea. I like quarterly in person. We can revisit the day, and I guess this whole topic of in person versus virtual. Hopefully next month we have maybe everybody in attendance, so we can get the whole group to weigh in on that. But I definitely like the idea of trying to do at least a quarterly in person. That makes sense to me. So, yeah. I'll probably put that one on the old business agenda for next month, like I said, in hopes of more attendance. So thank you for the thoughts on that. That brings us to our old business item, our probably oldest piece of old business, I guess, the Historic Preservation Code rewrite. And Melinda and Matt were both there, but just wanted to give an update on what happened at the special city council session. And Eric and Brian were there also, and were kind enough to speak up, I guess, on behalf of the code revisions we proposed. And I had to attend that one virtually. I just couldn't be there in person, unfortunately. And but I took it. My take on that is that it was good news insofar as there were not a lot of questions about the changes we're proposing overall. The main focus and 90% of the questions in that session about that piece of Title 16 were focused on the number of people it takes to designate a historic district, or the percentage of property owners, I should say more accurately, it takes to designate a historic district. As we had drafted the proposed ordinance, it stood at 50%, and we had, Ken, for your benefit, quite a lot of internal debate about how many folks who own property in a proposed district should have to agree to that district being designated as historic. And we went back and forth. We looked at a lot of different ordinances from other cities on the Front Range, and we landed on 50%. We found consensus, I think, across the commission. The city council has said, I think, well, I think
simple
it's,
majority,
I think it's
51.
50. simple majority, so 50% plus one, I guess,
Yeah.
is what that would be. That is right. City council, there's a consensus among city council that they want that to be 75%. That was the main point that emerged, and the main point that I guess they disagreed with in our proposal. But there was not a lot of discussion, or what I perceive to be disagreement, about the proposed amendments to the ordinance. So I think my take was, with the change to 75% for designation for owners consenting to designation of a historic district, I think the ordinance is on track to be passed, to be enacted as part of CodeNext, which will be the culmination of a lot of work of this commission and a major update and upgrade, I suppose, to Melinda's earlier point, from the 2004 version of the ordinance that we're currently operating under. So that was my takeaway. But Matt and Melinda, I know you were also there, so I'll invite your comments about that meeting as well.
Okay. Yeah, there was, it is funny. You're right. We did have a lot of debate on the percentage. And it's interesting that they went where they did with it, but I'd almost say that the benefit in the situation is all their attention was focused on the percentage. They didn't actually pay attention
Yes.
to the other stuff.
100% agree.
So I don't know if they're probably watching this right now, so but we very much appreciate them passing it, or at least
Yes.
agreeing to it in consensus. But the fact that the attention, it was predominantly on the percentage of that. I don't know. Do we challenge it as a commission, or do we go forward with it? I think we had actually discussed the 75% as one of our options when we originally provided the recommendations, but
I did some research looking around at other localities. The Preservation Ordinance Guide for CLGs says some jurisdictions require a simple majority, but a relatively low threshold may make designation controversial. Depending on the community, a more feasible percentage may be 75%.
Yeah.
So that I noticed Golden just calls it a majority of the landowners. Longmont says a significant concentration of designated landmarks will make a historic district. Longmont, I recently learned, was the first CLG. It has 132 designated landmarks and 3 historic districts.
Wow.
I knew it. I think at least Matt and Melinda know. I grew up in Longmont. I was born and raised there, and that has been there are plaques on a lot of properties in Longmont, in the side of town I grew up on, the west side, and that's been true since I was a kid. So I'm not surprised that they were ahead of the curve a little bit on that.
Yeah, 132 designated properties. I mean, and really, Longmont is not that much older than Inglewood.
No, it's not. I mean,
They started about the same time, really.
That's exactly right. Like 1860s or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Matt, it's a good point. I mean, my take on I think we concede that point, because I think we're on the cusp of getting this passed. Also, I don't think we're going to win. I mean, I think council, the folks who actually get to vote on it, made pretty clear that there is consensus around 75% being the number. And I understand council's point on that. I get it. I mean, I also understand where we were coming from and what we proposed. So if we're getting the rest of that ordinance, which is such a, like I said, upgrade from the 2004 version we're currently operating under, I think we call that a victory and take it and run.
Sure.
Well, and there's, I mean, certain members of council who are going to be hostile no matter what we propose, and if they'll. So I mean, the likelihood of us even getting to designate any landmarks is, slim. So that, worrying about historic districts is a long way in the future.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say let's keep an eye on it. Let's see
Yeah.
how this progresses.
Question for you, Eric. Do we need to do anything further as this commission with that ordinance, or now that it's in council's hand and they found consensus around 75%, will they just have the city attorney's office redrafted and move on from there? Does that question make sense, Eric?
Yeah, sure. And I think that is what will happen.
Yeah,
Since,
okay.
the HPC voted on the language that went before council in that study session to approve that language. So I'm guessing at this point, it just goes to the attorney office to make that change, and then it goes into the CodeNext.
Perfect. So yeah, it's overall, like I said, it's good news. I think we're on track once they get to passing CodeNext, which is hopefully soon. Like Eric said, that was kind of supposed to be maybe the end of last year. Hopefully it's maybe the middle of this year, but it seems like maybe in calendar 2023 we'll have that ordinance passed. Knock on steering wheel. All right. Well, good. Thank you to everyone, Eric, and tell Brian thanks too, and Matt and Melinda. Thanks to everyone for attending that council meeting. And that Eric brings us to staff's choice. If you have anything.
I don't this time. I just got back from Mexico, so I'm still kind of putting my stuff back in order.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Hope you enjoyed Mexico.
It was
How
great.
How could you not enjoy Mexico? But I hope you did.
It was a great time.
Good. Commissioner's choice. I don't have anything. I'll just go around the four of us that are here. Matt, anything for commissioner's choice?
I just wanted to say thank you to whoever sent out the tote bags. That was really cool to receive that and see our work. I'm curious who all got those in the city, if it was just our commission or if they went out to other commissions. Eric, do you know?
I'm only aware of them going to Historic Preservation Commission, but I believe that was on behalf of communications. So there are some other people who may have gotten them. I just don't know who. I just know it was HPC, and I got one, so that was cool.
That's so cool,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, those were cool. They're very cool. Yeah. Thank you to whoever in communications did that. That was cool.
Chris Hardwick. I'd imagine that's probably Chris's department, right, Eric? Yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah.
Chris and Madeline.
Yeah, so when you see Chris or Madeline, tell them thank you.
Yes. Agreed. Anything else, Matt?
Nope, that's it.
Melinda. Great, thanks, Melinda.
No, I didn't have anything. Can enjoy that opinion report. And I'll add that the one house on South Lincoln that's is across the street from me, and the local neighborhood lore has that it's haunted.
Thanks, Melinda. Ken, anything for commissioner's choice?
No, not for me.
Okay, great. Well, that brings us to the end of the agenda, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. I don't believe we have to vote on that one, so we'll stand in adjournment at
I do need a
7:30.
second.
Sorry. Does anyone want to
Second.
second that motion?
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
It's been moved and seconded, so we'll stand in adjournment at 7:39 PM.
All right, perfect. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you
George
all.
Cash.
Thanks.
Yeah.
See you next month.
Have a good
Take
night.
care.
Have
Bye.
a good night.